They invited the fat maid to dance as a joke, but she danced like a professional. Elena Miller was polishing the crystal glasses when she felt all eyes turned to her. The sudden silence in the mansion's ballroom made her heart race, knowing something bad was about to happen. Then she heard Julian Sterling's drawling voice, the boss's son, echo through the luxurious space. "Hey everyone, how about a bet? I'll pay $1,000 to anyone who can get the fat cleaning lady to dance with me." Laughter exploded like knives cutting through the air. Elena felt her face burn with shame, her hands trembling, making the glasses clink dangerously. She needed that job. Her mother, Martha Miller, had been hospitalized for 3 weeks with pneumonia, and the medicine cost a fortune she could barely afford on her maid's salary. "Come on, Mrs. Elena," shouted one of Julian's friends, a blonde in a white dress she recognized from the society pages. "Show us you know how to have fun." Elena lowered her head, trying to become invisible. She knew that humiliation well. At 42 years old and weighing 260 pounds, she had gone through similar situations her whole life. But this time was different. This time, 200 people from New York City's elite watched her dignity being shattered for entertainment. Julian approached with long strides, his impeccable tuxedo contrasting with her faded blue uniform. The yellow rubber gloves seemed even more ridiculous amidst the artificial elegance surrounding her. "No need to be shy, Eleanor," he said, extending his hand with a cruel smile. "It's just a little dance. $1,000. Think about what you could do with that money." The entire ballroom awaited her response. Eleanor looked around and saw expectant faces, some filled with pity, others with morbid amusement. She felt a tear roll down her cheek, but something inside her began to simmer. An old memory buried 15 years ago started to stir in her chest. She slowly took off the yellow gloves, letting them fall onto the marble floor. Her hands, calloused from hard labor, still held the delicacy that had once known stages and applause. When she accepted Julian's hand, more laughter erupted. The music began, a classic waltz that made her heart pound for reasons no one there could imagine. Julian tried to lead her clumsily, hoping she would trip and provide more entertainment for his friends. But Elena closed her eyes. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us beginners. Now continuing. And when she opened them again, she was no longer the ashamed maid. She was Elena Miller, prima ballerina of the Metropolitan Opera House, her body transformed completely. Her movements flowed with a precision that made the entire ballroom stop breathing. Each step revealed years of rigorous training. Each spin defied any prejudice about her current physique. Julian, completely lost, stumbled trying to keep up with a technique that was light years beyond his understanding. The laughter died one by one. Silence took over the room as Elena danced with a grace that turned her body into pure art. Tears streamed down her face, but her movements told a story no one there knew, a story of glory, downfall, and survival. In the front row, Arthur Sterling, the mansion's owner, turned pale. He whispered something urgent to his wife, Eleanor, who widened her eyes in total shock. "It can't be," she murmured, her hand over her mouth. One of the oldest waiters, Arthur, who had worked in the house for 20 years, muttered quietly, "My God, it's her. The ballerina from the Metropolitan Opera House." The music continued, and Elena gave herself completely. Each movement was a declaration that she still existed, that beneath that blue uniform and those extra pounds, the artist who had once made crowds weep with emotion was still alive. Julian had given up trying to keep up with her, remaining merely an embarrassed spectator of his own cruelty. When the waltz came to an end, the silence was deafening. No one applauded. No one laughed. The collective awkwardness hung in the air like a dense cloud. Elena adjusted her uniform, wiped away her tears, and without saying a word, headed for the kitchen. Julian stood frozen in the middle of the dance floor, his face red with humiliation. His friends avoided his gaze, clearly ashamed for having taken part in that humiliation that had backfired on them. Some guests began whispering among themselves, all wanting to know who that woman was. In the kitchen, Mrs. Hazel, the head of the maids, held Elena close as she broke down in tears. The 60-year-old woman, who had worked for the Sterling family for 3 decades, knew far more than she let on. I always knew who you were, Hazel said, stroking Elena's hair. I always respected your silence, but I never forgot the ballerina I saw at the theater when I was young. Elena sobbed in the older woman's arms. For 15 years, she had completely buried her past. No one in her new world knew that she had once been Elena Miller, the dance prodigy who had conquered the United States at 20 and become a legend at 25. Outside, the party had completely lost its spirit. The guests chatted in small groups, uneasy with what they had witnessed. Many were beginning to vaguely remember that famous ballerina who had mysteriously vanished from the stages years ago. Arthur Sterling entered the kitchen with hesitant steps. His face was pale, and his hands trembled visibly. He asked to speak with Elena in private. In the home office, away from prying eyes, Arthur couldn't stop pacing back and forth. His voice trembled when he finally spoke. Elena Miller, the American Swan, the ballerina who performed at my wedding 20 years ago. Elena lifted her face, surprised. She hadn't expected him to remember. How did you... she began, but Arthur interrupted her. How could I forget? It was the most beautiful performance I've ever seen in my life. Eleanor cried so much she ruined her makeup. We both always wondered what happened to you. One day you were in the papers, at the theater, conquering the world. The next, you vanished completely. Arthur sat down, the weight of the discovery evident on his shoulders. Please tell me, why are you here? Why are you cleaning my house? Eleanor took a deep breath. It was a story she hadn't told anyone in 15 years, but something in the sincerity of the man before her made her decide to open her heart. It was during a performance of Swan Lake, she began, her voice low. I was at the height of my career. I had just signed a contract to perform in Paris, London, New York. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. She paused, the painful memories flooding back like waves. In the second act, during a sequence of jumps I'd executed for years, something went wrong. My right knee simply gave out. The sound of the crack echoed through the entire theater. The pain. It was as if my soul was being ripped from my body. Arthur listened in respectful silence. The doctors said I would never dance professionally again. 15 surgeries later, I could barely walk without limping. The insurance I thought I had turned out to be a fraud. The company had gone bankrupt months before, but no one told me. I was left with $500,000 in hospital debt. Eleanor wiped away a tear that insisted on falling. I lost my apartment, my car, all my savings. My friends from the art world vanished when the money ran out. I moved to the outskirts of New York City with my mother, who always worked as a house cleaner to support me while I studied dance. And then your mother got sick, Arthur finished, beginning to grasp the scale of the tragedy. Martha has always been my rock. She worked 3 jobs to pay for my dance lessons when I was a kid. She never complained, never made me feel guilty for our sacrifices. When I lost everything, she took me in without judgment. But at 65, she started having breathing problems. Eleanor stood up, walking to the window overlooking the luxurious garden. I needed to take care of her, pay for her medicine, her doctor's appointments. There's no job for a 40-year-old ex-ballerina, so I took the only work I could get, cleaning, first in offices, then in homes. I've been working here for 3 years. You've always treated me well. I never knew you knew who I was. Arthur approached her. I didn't know. I only recognized you when I saw you dance. That style, that technique, it's unmistakable. Eleanor, why didn't you ask for help? I would have... Charity, Eleanor interrupted, but without aggression. I've lived off that my whole life, Arthur. People feeling sorry for the poor girl who could dance well. I didn't want pity anymore. I wanted dignity, even if it meant cleaning bathrooms. Silence stretched between them for long minutes. And now? Arthur asked. After what happened out there? Now I go home, take care of my mother, and plan to forget this ever happened, Eleanor replied, walking toward the door. Eleanor, wait. Arthur held her arm. My son, Julian. He's not a bad kid. He's lost, rebellious, but not bad. Let me talk to him and please accept some help for your mother. I don't need charity, Arthur. I just needed respect, something that apparently costs more than I thought. Elena left the office, leaving Arthur alone with his thoughts. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. In the kitchen, Mrs. Hazel had prepared a hot tea for Elena. The other maids, Beatrice, the 50-year-old cook, and Daisy, the 20-year-old who handled the laundry, surrounded Elena with silent solidarity. "Girl," said Beatrice, "I've worked my whole life for rich people. I've seen it all. But I've never seen anything as beautiful as what you did out there." "You showed them we're not invisible," added Daisy. "You showed them we have a story, we have value." Eleanor smiled for the first time that night. These simple women understood her pain in a way that all the elite out there never could. From outside the kitchen they heard raised voices. Julian had returned, but this time he was being confronted by his own father. "How could you be so cruel?" Arthur's voice echoed through the hallway. "Do you have any idea who this woman is?" "Dad, it was just a joke." "A joke? A joke?" Arthur shouted as he rarely did. "You humiliated one of the greatest artists this country has ever had. Elena Miller, Julian, the ballerina from the Metropolitan Opera House." The silence that followed was heavy. Even in the kitchen, the women could feel the young man's shock. That's not possible," came Julian's trembling voice. "It's not only possible, it's real. And I'm going to tell you exactly who the woman you decided to turn into a clown for your friends is." Arthur told Eleanor's entire story. Her meteoric rise, the accident, the fall, the struggle for survival. With each word, his son's silence grew heavier. In the kitchen, Eleanor listened to everything with tears in her eyes. She had never expected Arthur to know her story in such detail. "And now," Julian asked, his voice small, "now you go out there and apologize. For real. And you will learn that humiliating people is not a sign of superiority, it's a sign of weakness." 15 minutes later, Julian walked into the kitchen. The four women looked at him with suspicion. The 28-year-old man, always arrogant, seemed to have shrunk 10 centimeters. "Elena," he began, his voice choked. I didn't know." "If you had known, would it have made a difference?" she asked, without hostility, but firmly. The question caught Julian off guard. He opened and closed his mouth several times before he could answer. It should, shouldn't it? But honestly, I don't know if it would." The brutal honesty of the answer surprised everyone in the kitchen. "Why did you do it?" Elena asked. Julian sat down on one of the chairs, looking like a lost boy in a grown man's body. "Because I'm a coward," he said simply. "I always have been. I grew up being Arthur Sterling's son, the businessman of the year, the philanthropist, the guy everyone admires. People stick by me for what my father has, not for who I am." He looked at his own hands. "So I learned that by humiliating others, I felt better about myself. For a few minutes I wasn't the spoiled, useless son. I was the guy in charge, the one in control. It was pathetic, but it worked." "And your friends?" asked Mrs. Hazel. "They're just like me. Daughters of rich people with no purpose in life. We get together to laugh at others so we don't have to look at our own problems." Eleanor studied him for long seconds. "Julian, you're 28 years old. You're old enough to choose who you want to be." "I know, and I choose badly every time." He lifted his face to look at her. "Eleanor, I know my apologies won't erase what I did. But I'm genuinely sorry. Not just because I found out who you are, but because I saw the pain in your eyes. And that pain was real." Eleanor felt something stir in her chest. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a start. "Julian, do you want to know something? During all these years of being humiliated, you know what hurt the most?" He shook his head. "It wasn't the humiliation itself. It was realizing that people could look at me and only see a fat maid. As if my story, my achievements, my dreams simply didn't exist. As if I were invisible." "But you're not invisible," Julian said, his voice low. "When you danced—" God, Elena, it was like the world stopped. I've never seen anything so beautiful in my life. "Then why did it take me dancing for you to see me as a person?" The question hung in the air. Julian had no answer, and everyone in the kitchen knew it. At that moment, Arthur walked into the kitchen. Eleanor, can I talk to you for a moment? They went out to the backyard, away from prying ears. Eleanor, I have a proposal for you. Arthur, hear me out. A friend of mine, Margaret Harrington, just opened a dance school for underprivileged youth in the Upper East Side. She's looking for a teacher who understands classical technique and life as well. Someone who knows how to teach not just steps, but overcoming obstacles. Eleanor looked at him suspiciously. It's not charity, Arthur continued quickly. It's a real job. Fair salary, official employment, transportation vouchers, health insurance that can include your mother. Margaret told me she urgently needs someone qualified. Why are you doing this? Because 20 years ago, your dance saved my marriage. Eleanor looked at him confused. Eleanor and I were going through a serious crisis. We almost split up a week before the wedding. But when you danced that day, when we saw the passion, the dedication, the beauty a person can put into what they love, we understood that our love deserved the same dedication. Arthur smiled sadly. Your art inspired us to fight for our relationship. Today, 20 years later, we're still grateful for that. This is my chance to give back. Elena felt the tears return. What if I can't do it anymore? What if my knee can't handle demonstrating the movements? Elena said she doesn't need to dance. She needs to teach. She needs to inspire. And that, Elena Miller, you did today without even realizing it. She looked at the mansion, where the party continued at a lower volume. Can I think about it? Of course. But Elena, don't let the fear of trying again stop you from living again. The next day, Eleanor woke up in the small room she shared with her mother on the outskirts of the Bronx. Martha was better, the antibiotics finally taking effect. How was the party, sweetheart? Her mother asked, sitting on the small bed. Eleanor told her everything, about the humiliation, about the dance, about the discoveries. Martha listened in silence, holding her daughter's hand. And now what are you going to do? I don't know, Mom. I'm scared. Scared of what? Of failing again, of finding out I'm not good enough anymore, of seeing pity in people's eyes. Martha squeezed her daughter's hand. Eleanor, do you think I was scared when I left the countryside to work in New York City? Were you? Every day. But you know what gave me courage? Knowing I was doing it out of love. Love for you, for your dreams, and now you have the chance to do for other kids' dreams what I did for yours. Eleanor hugged her mother, feeling an ancient strength stirring in her chest. That same day she called Margaret Harrington. The school was in a renovated warehouse in Compton. When Elena arrived, she found Margaret, an elegant woman in her 60s, who had been the director of the Metropolitan Opera House for 2 decades. Eleanor Miller, Margaret said, extending her hands, you have no idea what an honor it is to meet you in person. Margaret, I need to be honest. It's been 15 years since I last taught dance. My knee isn't what it used to be. I don't know if... Elena, have you seen the children who will be studying here? Margaret pointed to a group of 12 young people between 8 and 16 years old. They were visibly poor children, some in patched clothes, others with the wary look of those who had been bullied. They don't need a perfect teacher. They need someone who understands what it means to fall and get back up, someone who knows that dance can save lives because it saved her own. Eleanor looked at the children. In their eyes she saw reflections of her own journey. When can I start? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing, Elena's first class was a disaster. The children were suspicious, she was nervous, and her leg hurt after just 20 minutes of standing. But there was something there, an energy she recognized from her early days in dance. Teacher, said a 10-year-old girl named Skylar, were you really famous? Yes, Skylar, a long time ago. And did you lose everything? I lost everything. And now you're here with us. I'm here with you. The girl looked thoughtful. So we don't have to be ashamed of being poor, right? If even a famous ballerina can become poor and still be important. The answer caught Elena off guard. In that moment, she understood she had found her purpose again. Weeks passed. Elena developed a unique methodology, adapted to the students' physical limitations and her own. She taught that dance wasn't about perfection, but about expression. It wasn't about standard beauty, but about emotional truth. Her first special student was Destiny, a 13-year-old girl who weighed 200 pounds and came to school in tears. She had been humiliated at school by classmates who called her Whale. "Destiny," Elena said on the first day, "do you know why I started dancing?" The girl shook her head. "Because it was the only thing that made me forget we were poor. When I danced, it didn't matter if my clothes were patched or if we couldn't afford lunch. I was free." "But you were skinny, right?" Elena smiled. "Destiny, let me tell you a secret. The best dancers aren't the skinniest. They're the ones who pour the most soul into their movements. You have soul, girl. I can see it in your eyes." For 2 months, Eleanor worked individually with Destiny. She taught her that her body wasn't the enemy, but the instrument. That dance wasn't about pleasing others, but about finding herself. And slowly, Destiny began to shine. Meanwhile, changes were happening at the Sterling mansion. Arthur had implemented an employee appreciation program with better salaries and benefits, but the most surprising change was in Julian. The young man had sought out Elena at the school 3 times. The first 2, she refused to see him. On the third, Mrs. Elena convinced her to give him a chance. "Elena, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," Julian said, standing at the warehouse door, "but I wanted you to know that your courage changed my life." "How so?" "After that day, I started questioning everything about myself. I went to therapy. I apologized to everyone I ever humiliated. I'm learning who I want to be." Eleanor observed him. There was something different about the young man. Arrogance had given way to genuine humility. "And what did you discover?" "That I want to be someone who helps, not someone who hurts. And I'd like to help here, if you'll allow it." Elena laughed. "Julian, you don't know anything about dance." "I don't need to know about dance. I can handle administration, marketing, fundraising. This school deserves to grow, and I can help make that happen." That's how Julian became the volunteer administrator of Mrs. Elena's school. He worked tirelessly to secure donations, equipment, and partnerships. More importantly, he discovered that helping others was far more rewarding than humiliating them. 6 months after that fateful night at the mansion, the school organized its first performance. The theater was packed. Arthur and Eleanor sat in the front row, next to Martha, who had finally fully recovered. Backstage, Eleanor tried to calm the children's nerves. "Remember," she said, "you're not here to be perfect. You're here to be yourselves." Destiny, now 30 pounds lighter and with a smile that lit up any room, approached. "Teacher, I'm scared." "Of what, my child?" "That they'll laugh at me like they laughed at you." Eleanor hugged the girl. "Destiny, if they laugh, remember one thing. They laugh because they don't understand. And whoever doesn't understand art is missing the chance to be touched by beauty. The loss is theirs, not ours." The performance was an absolute success. The children danced with such passion that the entire theater was moved to tears. Destiny performed a solo inspired by Elena's story that received a standing ovation. When the curtain closed, Mrs. Elena called Elena to the stage. "This school exists thanks to many generous people," Mrs. Elena said into the microphone. "But it exists mostly thanks to a woman who lost everything and discovered she still had so much to give. Elena Miller, our artistic director." Elena walked onto the stage with difficulty. Her legs still hurt when she stood for too long. But when she saw the audience standing and applauding, when she saw Martha crying with pride, when she saw Destiny beaming backstage, she felt she had found a purpose greater than all her previous dreams. "I'm not going to give a long speech," she said into the microphone. "I just want to say that for 15 years, I thought my story had ended when I stopped dancing. Today I discovered it was just waiting for the next chapter." The applause was deafening. After the performance, there was a reception in the theater lobby. Elena was talking to emotional parents when she felt a hand touch her shoulder. It was Julian, but he wasn't alone. By his side stood a woman in her early 30s, elegant but unpretentious. "Elena, I'd like you to meet Brooke Taylor. She's a journalist and she's doing a series on personal transformations. I'd really like to share your story." Elena hesitated. 15 years of anonymity aren't easily set aside. "Why do you think my story would interest anyone?" Brooke stepped closer. "Elena, your story isn't just about dance. It's about resilience, about dignity, about discovering that it's never too late to start over. In a world that discards people when they no longer fit the mold, you prove that human worth has no expiration date." Elena looked around. She saw her children chatting animatedly with the audience. She saw Margaret, radiant with the school's success. She saw Julian, transformed from adversary to ally. She saw her mother, finally healthy and proud. "All right," she said, "but on one condition." "What's that?" "The story isn't just mine. It's ours, of all of us who fell and got back up, of all the kids who think they have no value, of all the adults who think it's too late to change." The article came out 3 weeks later in the National magazine. The title was "The Ballerina Who Lost Everything and Found It All Again." The impact was immediate and intense. Donations started pouring in from across the country. Other dance schools wanted to replicate Elena's methodology. Speaking invitations arrived daily. But the most special moment came from an unexpected source. The Metropolitan Opera House called. "Eleanor," said the current director, "we'd like to honor you with a special performance. Your former dance partners have reunited and put together a show in your honor." "I don't dance professionally anymore," Eleanor replied. "We don't want you to dance. We want you to be yourself, to tell your story, to inspire others just as you inspired your students." The tribute was scheduled at the same theater where Eleanor had been injured 15 years earlier. It would be her first time back on that stage. On the night of the event, the theater was packed. Elena arrived accompanied by her students, who were special guests. Martha sat in the front row alongside the Sterlings, Arthur, Eleanor, and Julian, who had become something of an adopted son to her. When Eleanor stepped onto the stage, the silence was respectful. She looked at the floor where she had fallen 15 years earlier and felt a deep sense of peace. "I fell right there," she said, pointing. "I fell literally and I fell metaphorically. I thought it was the end of my story." She walked to the center of the stage. "But today I understand that fall wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a journey that taught me our worth isn't in what we do, but in who we are. It isn't in what we lose, but in what we discover we still have to give." Backstage, her former partners waited for the performance. They were women who were now in their 40s, 50s, 60s, but who still carried the elegance and technique that had made them famous. "This performance," Eleanor continued, "is dedicated to everyone who has ever felt invisible, to everyone who has been judged by appearance, by profession, by financial situation. You are not invisible. You are unique and valuable." The music began, and her former partners entered the stage. It was a new choreography, created especially for that night, telling the story of a woman who falls, loses herself, but finds an inner strength that makes her rise again, stronger than before. Elena did not dance. She stood at the side of the stage, narrating her journey as the dance unfolded. But her presence was as powerful as any movement. When the music ended, something unexpected happened. Destiny stepped onto the stage. "Teacher," the girl said into the microphone, "you said you don't dance anymore, but we, your students, would like to dance with you. Not as professionals, but as daughters of the heart." All of Elena's students stepped onto the stage. A soft melody began to play, the same waltz she had danced at the Sterling party. Elena looked at the girls, then at the audience. Tears streamed down her face. "I can't." "Yes, you can," said Skylar. "You taught us that dance comes from the heart, not the legs." And so, surrounded by her students, Elena danced for the last time in public. It wasn't a technical dance, it wasn't perfect. It was a dance of love, of gratitude, of celebrating life. The audience openly wept. Backstage, her former colleagues hugged each other, emotional. In the front row, Martha hid her face in her hands, too proud to express in words. When the music ended, the theater erupted in applause that lasted 10 full minutes. Eleanor looked at the audience, and then at her students. "Thank you," was all she could manage to say. After the performance, there was a big party in the theatre lobby. Eleanor was exhausted but happy in a way she hadn't felt in years. Julian approached her with an envelope in his hands. "Elena, I have a surprise for you." "Julian, you've already done too much. Open it." Inside the envelope was a deed. Elena read it twice before she understood. "It's a plot of land?" "It's a 2,000 square meter plot in the Upper East Side. With donations from several business people, we managed to buy a proper space for Margaret's school. Now you don't have to pay rent anymore." Eleanor looked at Margaret, who was smiling next to Julian. "Besides that," Margaret continued, "we have funding to build 3 classrooms, a small theatre, and housing for teachers. If you want, you can live there and run the school full-time." Eleanor couldn't believe it. "And there's more," said Arthur, approaching. "Eleanor and I decided to create a scholarship fund. Any underprivileged child who wants to study dance will get full support. Tuition, uniforms, transportation, and even help for the family if needed." Elena sat down, the impact of all the news too much to process. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because you taught us that transforming lives is the most profitable investment there is," replied Arthur. 2 years had passed since that night at the Sterling Mansion. Eleanor's school, now called the Eleanor Miller Academy, had become a national benchmark in community dance. Destiny, now 17, had won a full scholarship to study dance in Europe. Skylar, at 12, was already teaching classes for younger children. Dozens of other children had passed through the school, all transformed by the experience. Elena lived in the small apartment built at the school. Martha had moved in with her and helped with the administration. Julian visited daily, becoming not just the administrator, but a son she never had. One Saturday morning, Elena was teaching a class for a group of new children when she heard a commotion in the courtyard. She went out to see what was happening and found a news van parked in front of the school. "Elena Miller?" asked a young reporter approaching. "Yes?" "I'm Courtney Morgan from Global News Network. We're doing a series on inspiring Americans. We'd really like to include your story." Eleanor sighed. She still wasn't used to the media attention. "Look, Courtney, my story has already been told several times, but not this way. We want to show the real impact your work is having. We have testimonials from former students, parents, educators. Your methodology is being studied at universities." Eleanor looked at her children, playing in the courtyard without the slightest idea that they were part of something bigger. "All right, but do it for them, not for me." The recording took the entire day. The reporter interviewed students, parents, volunteer teachers. The result was a 1-hour documentary that aired during prime time. The impact was even greater than expected. Donations came in from across Latin America. Invitations to replicate the methodology came from the United States and Europe. But the invitation that moved Elena the most came from an unexpected place: the Bronx, where she had lived for the past 15 years. The city wanted to create a community center in the neighborhood and invited Elena to lead the project. It would be an opportunity to bring art and culture to the community that had welcomed her during her toughest moments. Elena accepted on the spot. The community center opened a year later with a celebration that lasted 3 days. There were workshops in dance, theater, music, and visual arts, all free for the neighborhood residents. On opening night, Eleanor stepped onto the makeshift stage in the middle of the square. Before her were hundreds of people, some who had known her from her days as a housekeeper, others who had only recently discovered her story. 15 years ago, she said, I arrived in this neighborhood broken in every way. I had no money, no prospects, no hope. You took me in without knowing me, gave me work when no one else wanted me, treated me with dignity when I had lost all my self-esteem. She paused, looking at the familiar faces in the crowd. This center isn't my gift to you. It's my thank you for saving me when I needed it most. Applause echoed through the square, but Eleanor wasn't finished. I want to tell you about a night 3 years ago. I was at a party serving the wealthy when a guy decided to humiliate me in front of everyone. He invited me to dance like it was a joke. Silence fell over the square. That night, I danced. I danced with anger, with pain, with despair. I thought I was dancing to show them who I was. Today I understand that I was dancing to remind myself who I always was." Eleanor smiled. That guy thought he was humiliating me. In truth, he was setting me free. Because from that moment on, I stopped being ashamed of my past and started taking pride in my journey. In the crowd, Julian was clapping with tears in his eyes. Beside him, Arthur and Eleanor hugged him. The family had grown closer after all the transformation they had gone through. "So thank you," Elena concluded. "Thank you for teaching me that home isn't where we are born, but where we are loved. Thank you for proving that family isn't just blood, it's choice. And thank you for showing me that starting over isn't a sign of failure, it's a sign of courage." The party went on until dawn. Eleanor danced with dozens of people, from 5-year-old children to 80-year-old women. Her leg ached, but her heart was full. When the sun came up, she sat on a bench in the square with Martha Miller. "Daughter," her mother said, "are you sure you're happy?" "Why, Mom?" "Sometimes I look at you and wonder if you miss that life, the stages, the fame, the recognition." Elena thought for a moment. "Mom, in that life I danced for thousands of people who applauded me, but I felt alone. Today I dance for dozens of children who hug me, and I feel complete." Martha smiled. "And that guy, Julian, did you really forgive him?" Eleanor looked at Julian, who was helping clean up the square alongside other volunteers. "You know, Mum, Julian did me a favor without knowing it. He forced me to stop hiding. If it weren't for that humiliating night, I might have spent the rest of my life just cleaning houses and crying over what I lost. And now? Now I build futures, not just my own, but the futures of hundreds of children who discover through dance that they are special." They sat in silence for a few minutes watching the city wake up. "Elena," Martha said finally. "Yes, Mom, I'm proud of you." Elena hugged her mother, feeling she had finally arrived where she had always belonged. 5 years had passed since that night at the Sterling Mansion. Elena, now 47, ran 3 cultural centers in New York City and had written 2 books on her social dance methodology. Destiny had become a professional dancer in Europe, but returned every year to give workshops at the academy. Skylar was in college studying dance pedagogy, determined to follow in her teacher's footsteps. Julian had married Brooke Taylor, the journalist who had told Elena's story. Together, they created a foundation that supported social projects across the United States. Arthur and Eleanor had become adoptive grandparents to all the children at the academy. Martha, now 70, still helped with administration and was the most beloved person among the students. On an ordinary Tuesday, Eleanor was teaching a class when she received an unexpected phone call. "Elena Miller, this is the Royal Academy of Dance in London. We'd like to invite you to give a series of lectures on social dance." Eleanor almost dropped the phone. "London?" "Yes. Your methodology is revolutionizing dance education in Europe. We want to learn from you." Eleanor looked at her students, who watched her curiously. "Can I bring my students?" "Pardon?" "If I go, I'm bringing my dance group. They're an integral part of my work." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Elena, these are underprivileged children from the United States. They're the best dancers I know. If they can't come, neither will I." "All right, we'll arrange everything for 20 people." Elena hung up the phone and looked at the girls. "Who wants to see London?" The joyful scream was heard throughout the entire block. The trip happened 3 months later. 20 American children stepped onto the stage of the Royal Academy of Dance in London and captivated the audience with a performance about overcoming and hope. Eleanor was invited to give a lecture to 300 dance teachers from across Europe. At the end, she received an offer to write an international book about her methodology. "It's incredible," she told Martha over the phone. 15 years ago, I lost everything. Today, the world wants to learn from me." "Child," her mother replied, "you didn't lose everything 15 years ago. You were being prepared for this. God sometimes breaks our small plans to carry out His grand plans." Back in the United States, Elena made an important decision. She created a training program for social dance teachers. In 2 years, she had trained over 1,000 educators nationwide. The Elena Miller Academy became a network with 15 branches spread across the country. More than 5,000 children had gone through the programs, and many went on to pursue artistic careers. But Elena's most special project was yet to come. In partnership with the federal government, she developed a program called Step Into Class, which would bring dance lessons to public schools across the country. The goal was to use art as a tool for social inclusion and self-esteem development. The pilot program was launched in 100 schools. The results were astonishing: a reduction in violence, improved grades, and a decrease in dropout rates. Dance doesn't just teach movements, Elena explained in her lectures. It teaches discipline, teamwork, respect for one's own body and for others' bodies. It teaches that it's possible to be beautiful without conforming to a standard. In recognition of her work, Elena received dozens of national and international awards. But the award that moved her most came from an unexpected place. The City Council passed a law creating Community Dance Day, to be celebrated every year on the day Elena had danced at the Sterling Party. "It's funny," she said at the law's signing ceremony, "what was once my greatest humiliation has become a day of celebration." This proves that we never know what good can come from what only seems like pain. Julian, now 33 years old and a father of 2, approached her after the ceremony. "Elena, can I ask you a question I've always wanted to?" "Of course." "Did you really forgive me? Truly?" Elena smiled. "Julian, do you want to know the truth? It's been so long that I no longer think of that night as something you did to me. I think of it as something life did for me." "What do you mean?" "You were just the instrument. The universe needed a way to push me out of my comfort zone, to force me to stop hiding. You showed up at the right time, said the right words, even if they were cruel to wake me up." Julian grew thoughtful. "So you're saying everything happened for a reason?" "I'm saying I chose to give a reason to everything that happened. The difference is subtle, but important." That night, Elena returned to her apartment at the school. Martha was already asleep, but she stood on the balcony looking out at the city. 10 years had passed since that night at the mansion. She had rebuilt not only her own life, but the lives of thousands of others. Her phone rang. It was a message from Destiny, now a principal dancer at the Paris Opera. "Teacher, today I danced thinking of you." In the audience there was a chubby girl who cried because her parents forced her to come. At the end she came looking for me and said she wants to learn ballet. I gave her your book, Another Life You'll Transform, Even from a Distance. Love you. Elena smiled. This was what she was born for. Not to be the best dancer in the world, but to show the world that everyone can dance. She opened her laptop and started writing her 3rd book. This one would be different from the others. It would be her complete autobiography, telling every detail of her journey. The title was already decided: The Dance of Life, How Humiliation Became My Redemption. As she wrote, Elena reflected on everything she had learned. Life had taught her that strength is not never falling, but always getting back up. That beauty is not in perfection, but in authenticity. That success is not measured by the applause we receive, but by the lives we touch. At 2 a.m, she stopped writing and went to check on Martha. Her mother was sleeping peacefully, a smile on her face. At 75, Martha had finally seen all the sacrifices she made for her daughter, rewarded in ways she never imagined. Elena returned to the balcony. In the silence of the early morning, she began to dance alone. It was no longer the technical, perfect dance of her 20s. It was the dance of a woman who had lived, suffered, found herself, and transformed into a light for others. Her movements were limited by age and her knee injury, but they carried a beauty that only comes from lived experience. It was the dance of wisdom, gratitude, and inner peace. When she finished, she whispered to the night, "Thank you for everything." The next day, Elena received a call that made her cry with emotion. "Elena, this is Elizabeth from the Nobel Peace Prize Foundation. We'd like to talk about a nomination we've received." "A nomination for what?" "For the Nobel Peace Prize. Your work in social transformation through art has caught the attention of the international community." Elena was speechless. I can't believe. Obviously, it's just a nomination. The process is long. But we wanted you to know that your impact has transcended borders. There are projects inspired by your work in over 30 countries. When she hung up, Elena sat on the living room floor and cried, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. Martha appeared, worried. "What is it, honey?" Elena told her about the call. "Mom, do you remember when I got here 15 years ago, thinking my life was over?" "I do." "What if I told you that was the best day of my life?" Martha laughed. "I would say you've lost your mind." "No, Mom. It was the best day because it was when I stopped trying to be who I thought I should be and started discovering who I really am." They held each other for long minutes. "Elena," said Martha finally. "Yes? You know I'm the proudest mother in the world, right?" Elena smiled. "And you know none of this would exist without you, right? Without your sacrifices, without your strength, without your unconditional love. Honey, I just planted the seed. You made the tree grow." At that moment, the first children arrived for the morning class. Elena wiped away her tears and got ready for another day of work. But before starting, she did something that had become a ritual. She looked at the photo of her first class framed on the wall of the room. There was Destiny, still chubby and shy, Skylar, at 10 years old with eyes full of dreams, and 12 other children who had been her first students. Today, all of them had their lives transformed. Some pursued artistic careers, others became teachers, doctors, lawyers, but they all carried with them the most important lesson Elena taught them, that they were special exactly as they were. "Good morning, children," said Elena, as she had done every day for 10 years. "Good morning, teacher," answered in unison the 15 students of the morning class. "Today we're going to learn a new choreography, but first, I want you to tell me something you discovered about yourselves this week." Little hands shot up excitedly. Each child had a discovery to share. Elena listened to each one with genuine attention, because she had learned that her role wasn't just to teach dance, but to help every child discover their own inner light. And so, day after day, Elena continued her mission. One child at a time, one step at a time, building a world where everyone could dance their own life with dignity and joy. At night, when she closed the school, she always took one last look at the empty hall. On the walls, mirrors reflected decades of realized dreams. On the wooden floor, marks from thousands of steps that had transformed not just bodies, but souls. Elena turned off the lights, knowing that the next day she would wake up to do it all over again, and that there was no place in the world she would rather be, because she had finally understood that her true calling was never to be the best dancer in the world. It was to use dance to show the world that everyone deserves a chance to shine, and from that mission, she would never retire. End of the story. Now tell me, what did you think of Elena's story? Were you able to imagine your own inner strength while following her journey? Leave in the comments which moment moved you the most, and if you've also been through a situation where you had to rediscover your own worth. Your story might inspire other people going through tough times. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories of perseverance like this one.